Breathe in. There's a good chance part of that oxygen didn't come from a forest. It came from the ocean. Somewhere out there, right now, floats an organism so small you'd need a microscope to see it. No roots. No leaves. It doesn't even look like a plant, and yet. Together with billions of identical organisms, it produces close to half of all the oxygen made on Earth each year. There are so many of them that, when they bloom, entire patches of ocean turn visible from space. Green streaks and turquoise swirls stretching for miles, photographed by satellites that have no idea they're looking at an oxygen factory. That's not the only secret hiding in that same water. Nearby drifts something completely different. A fragment of life, almost transparent, barely bigger than a grain of salt, spinning helplessly in the current. It doesn't look anything like the animal it will become. In a few weeks, it could grow fins. It could grow a shell. It could grow tentacles. Right now, it has none of that. All it has is a current pulling it along, with no say in where it ends up. These two organisms aren't related in any way. One manufactures air. The other will, someday, become an animal you'd recognize on sight. But science files both of them under the exact same word. That word is plankton, and it doesn't describe a kind of animal. It describes a way of surviving. The word comes from Greek. Planktos. It means wanderer, the one that drifts. It doesn't refer to a shape, a color, or a size. It refers to exactly one thing: the inability to swim against the current. Under that single condition, you'll find organisms that have absolutely nothing else in common. Bacteria so small that tens of thousands could fit on the head of a pin. Single-celled algae shaped like stars, disks, spirals, each one built like a piece of cut glass at microscopic scale. Adult animals that will spend their entire lives adrift, never changing shape. And scattered among all of them, fragments of life that aren't what they appear to be: the first week of a crab, the first days of a starfish, the beginning of an octopus, a mussel, half the fish species in the ocean. Look closely enough at any of these creatures, and the resemblance to what they'll become simply isn't there yet. That crab, once it's grown, will walk across the seafloor with a shell and claws. Right now, it has neither. It's transparent, spine-shaped, and its eyes take up more space than the rest of its body. Put it next to an adult crab, and no one would guess they're the same animal. The starfish larva is even stranger. There's no trace of radial symmetry, none of the 5 arms you recognize on the beach. It's a bilateral organism, almost like an elongated drop lined with cilia, swimming actively for weeks before dissolving completely and rebuilding itself from scratch with an entirely different anatomy. It doesn't change shape. It dissolves and is reborn as something else. And yet, it's the same creature. Here's the problem with the word plankton. It doesn't describe kinship. A photosynthetic bacterium and a crab larva share no ancestry, no anatomy, no function. One manufactures its own food from sunlight. The other is born already hungry, depending on eating whatever it finds before something eats it first. The only thing they share is the current. Scientists split all of this into categories. Phytoplankton, the bacteria and algae that produce their own energy, get called primary producers. Zooplankton, the animals that feed on that phytoplankton, or on each other, get called consumers. And the larvae that spend just one stage of their lives drifting, before turning into something else entirely, are called meroplankton. 3 categories. 3 forms of life that don't resemble each other at all. One single word contains them all. Think about the real scale of this. In a single liter of seawater, there can be thousands of these organisms coexisting, producers manufacturing energy, consumers devouring them, and future sea creatures taking shape between the two, all drifting through the same handful of water, invisible to anyone looking at the surface from above. A fisherman could scoop up that water 1,000 times over and never notice any of it happening beneath his hands. This isn't a technicality. It's the first clue to why plankton matters so much. we're not talking about one species with one specific job. We're talking about an entire system. Producers, consumers, and the next generation of nearly everything that swims in the sea, trapped in the same stretch of water at the mercy of the same current. And if something this small, this varied, could actually shape something as large as the planet, the question stops being what plankton is. It becomes something else entirely. How can something this insignificant end up influencing something as vast as the Earth? Picture an organism made of a single cell, so small you'd need to line up several thousand of them, side by side, just to span the width of a fingernail. No mouth, no nervous system, nothing you'd recognize as part of a living thing. All it has is a membrane built to catch light. That cell is called prochlorococcus. It's the smallest photosynthetic organism known on Earth, and that tiny cell, multiplied across entire oceans, produces close to a fifth of all the oxygen the planet breathes, more than every tropical rainforest combined. It isn't alone. Around it float other microscopic algae, other photosynthetic bacteria, grouped by science under one name: phytoplankton. None of them have roots. None have leaves. None need soil, or rain, or a particular season. All they need is to float near the surface, where the light reaches, and let the current handle the rest. No forest on land has ever managed to grow with so little. Here's where it gets strange. A single photosynthetic organism produces so little oxygen it can barely be measured with ordinary instruments. So how does that insignificant amount add up to roughly half the oxygen in Earth's atmosphere? The answer isn't in the size, it's in the number. A single liter of seawater can hold hundreds of thousands of these cells. Multiply that across the surface of the ocean, nearly 3/4 of the planet, and the result stops being insignificant. It becomes the largest source of oxygen on Earth, bigger than all land vegetation combined. There's a time of year when this becomes visible, even to a satellite in orbit. When conditions align, phytoplankton multiply so fast they stain the water green, turquoise, a milky blue that stretches for hundreds of miles. From space, it looks like paint spilled across the ocean. From the water, it's a silent explosion of life, invisible to the human eye, happening cell by cell, with no animal ever noticing. It's one of the very few biological events on Earth large enough to be tracked from orbit, and it happens inside organisms too small to see with the naked eye. That oxygen doesn't stay in the sea. It rises to the surface, dissolves into the air, mixes with the rest of the atmosphere, and travels thousands of miles on the wind. Some of the air you're breathing right now has been traveling for weeks, sometimes longer, produced by a cell you'll never see, in an ocean you may never visit. But phytoplankton doesn't just make the air. It's also the foundation everything else depends on. Each one of those microscopic cells is food. Food for the zooplankton swimming around it. Food, indirectly, for the fish that eat that zooplankton. Food, even more indirectly, for the whales, the seals, the seabirds that depend on that chain to survive. Take away this one layer, invisible to the naked eye, and every link above it starts to unravel. It manufactures the air you breathe. It feeds the entire ocean. And still, this is only the beginning. Because producing oxygen and feeding an ecosystem doesn't explain how that system keeps running, day after day. And the answer to that happens somewhere no human has ever seen. Beneath the surface, every single night, on a scale that has no equal anywhere else on the planet. Every evening, as the sun starts to go down, something happens that no human being has ever witnessed in person. Not because it's rare, because it's too vast to witness. Hundreds of meters down, in a zone where almost no light reaches, billions of organisms begin moving upward. Rice grain-sized copepods, transparent larvae, tiny shrimp, creatures that spent the daylight hours hidden in the dark, far from the surface, now beginning their ascent with sunset as their only signal. No alarm sounds, no leader gives the order. It simply begins, all at once, across an entire ocean. This isn't a handful of animals. It's a migration involving, every single night, something close to 10 billion tons of biomass, more than any wildebeest migration on the savanna, more than any flock of birds crossing a continent, more than any animal movement ever recorded on land. And it happens every day, in every ocean on the planet, with almost no one aware it's happening. So why bother rising at all? During the day, the surface of the sea is the most dangerous place in the ocean. There's light. And with light comes predators that can see perfectly well. Fish, squid, birds diving from above. They all hunt better when they can see their prey. For a tiny, nearly transparent organism, staying near the surface in daylight is, quite literally, a death sentence. But the surface is also where the food is. That's where phytoplankton floats, the foundation the whole system depends on. And staying below, away from that food, means starving with certainty. So zooplankton solves the problem the only way it can. It changes floors twice a day. It rises at night, when darkness hides it from predators that hunt by sight, and feeds during the hours no one can see it. Before dawn, as light begins filtering back into the water, it starts its descent. Back down to depth, back to the cover of darkness, to wait for the next night to fall. Rise, feed, descend, hide. Every single day, for its entire life. Multiply that single decision. Rise, feed, hide, by billions of lives repeating it night after night, and it stops looking like behavior. It starts looking like a heartbeat, one the entire ocean shares. This migration isn't just an individual survival strategy. It has a consequence that reaches far beyond any one organism. When zooplankton rises to feed at the surface and sinks back down before sunrise, it doesn't just move itself. It carries with it the carbon it just ate, dragging it from the surface down into the depths every time it descends. That movement, repeated every night by billions of organisms in every ocean on Earth, transports enough carbon to influence the global climate. It is, without exaggeration, one of nature's most important mechanisms for pulling carbon out of the atmosphere and burying it on the ocean floor. No one designed this system. There's no intelligence coordinating it. It's simply the outcome of billions of tiny organisms solving the same problem. Hide by day, feed by night, all at once in the same ocean. And that system, silent and invisible, repeated every night for millions of years, is one of the pillars holding up the planet's climate. Now the question shifts again. It's no longer what plankton is. It's no longer how it makes oxygen or how it moves carbon. The question becomes what would happen if, overnight, all of this simply stopped. Picture an ordinary morning where phytoplankton simply stops producing oxygen. You don't need to imagine the whole ocean disappearing. It's enough for that microscopic layer near the surface, where light reaches, to collapse. Scientists have already seen what happens on a small scale when that occurs. It's called a dead zone, and the result isn't subtle. The water starts losing dissolved oxygen. Fish that can swim away flee. The ones that can't, the ones tied to a fixed patch of seafloor, the mollusks, the crabs, the bottom dwellers, suffocate within hours, not from hunger, from lack of air, inside their own home. Now multiply that collapse across the entire planet. Every coast, every current, every stretch of open water where this same microscopic layer quietly does its work. If phytoplankton disappeared at scale, the first consequence wouldn't be for the ocean. It would be for you. A huge share of the oxygen you breathe every day would stop being produced. Not all at once, not like an explosion. More like a slow, steady leak the atmosphere can't compensate for. But the air is only the first domino. Without phytoplankton, there's no food for zooplankton. Without zooplankton, there's no food for the small fish that depend on it. Without small fish, there's no food for the bigger fish, or the seabirds, or the seals, or the whales that migrate thousands of miles every summer just to reach the places where plankton is most abundant. The blue whale, the largest animal to have ever existed on Earth, larger than any dinosaur, depends entirely on organisms nearly invisible to the eye. No plankton, no krill, no blue whale. The most massive animal on the planet ultimately rests on something that fits inside a drop of water. And then there's the other half of the system, microplankton, the drifting larvae. If that stage of marine life collapsed, it wouldn't just mean missing adults of one species. It would mean losing the next generation of almost everything. Crabs that never get to walk the seafloor, starfish that never grow their 5 arms, fish that never get to swim in schools. An entire generation canceled before it begins, at the most fragile, defenseless point in its life. None of this happens in a single dramatic moment. There wouldn't be an empty ocean overnight. There would be an ocean that, year after year, produces less oxygen, feeds fewer animals, and gives birth to less life than it loses. A system shutting down slowly, starting with the smallest and ending with the largest. Plankton isn't a supporting character in this story. It's the foundation everything else literally rests on. And understanding what it truly is, not a species, but an entire system drifting together, changes completely the way you see the rest of the ocean. Everything you've seen in this video shares one single thing: not shape, not size, not even biology. It's the current. The same current that carries a photosynthetic cell also carries a larva that doesn't yet know what animal it will become. The same current pushing zooplankton upward every night is the one that, without meaning to, sustains the air you breathe and the next generation of nearly everything that swims in the sea. No one steers that current. No one designed it to work this way. It's simply the result of billions of organisms unable to swim against it, solving the same problem, each in its own way, for hundreds of millions of years, long before there was anyone to name any of it. Think about it again, now that you know all 3 layers. A cell with no mouth, no nervous system, nothing you'd recognize as life, quietly manufacturing an enormous share of the oxygen you just breathed. A nearly transparent larva, without a shell, without fins, without a final shape yet, that in a few weeks will walk the seafloor or swim in schools, never remembering how it began. And a migration of 10 billion tons, rising and falling every night, carrying enough carbon to tip, even slightly, the climate of the entire planet. 3 phenomena that don't resemble each other at all. One that breathes, one that hasn't found its shape yet, one that simply rises and falls. And yet none of the 3 could exist without the others. Without phytoplankton, there's no food for anyone. Without zooplankton, there's no one to carry that carbon or feed the fish. Without microplankton, there's no next generation. They need each other in a way no single animal ever needs another. That's why the question was never what plankton is. The question was what a current is capable of building once it's carrying enough life at once. And here's the answer: a massive share of the planet breathing because of something that can't swim. An entire ocean being born, every day, at its most fragile, defenseless stage, invisible even to the animals around it. And the largest movement of life on Earth, happening every night, in total darkness, that no human being has ever witnessed with their own eyes. None of it asked permission. None of it needed to be seen to be real. It was happening long before anyone existed who could ask why. And it's still happening right now, as you read this, in every liter of seawater on the planet. The closer you look, the stranger the world becomes.